In this video I'm taking a quick look at salt weathering, a simple technique that can add faded, patchy and naturally worn effects to a model's paintwork. It's not about heavy chipping or damage, it's more about breaking up a flat paint finish and giving the surface a bit of age, variation and character. After priming the model, I'm now laying down the first camouflage colour. For this I'm using Tamiya XF paint thinned with Mr. Colour Leveling Thinner 400, which gives a really smooth finish through the airbrush. At this stage I'm trying not to completely flood the surface or get a heavy coat on in one pass, rather a lighter coat. And that's the idea, that we're going to build up the colour gradually with a few lighter coats as we keep going with the process, and this way we keep the paint nice and controlled. Because the salt weathering will come later, this base colour is important. It gives us the main tone underneath, and once the salt and lighter layers go on the top, small areas of this colour will still show back through and help create a worn, faded look. So the aim here really is simply to get a good even foundation before moving on to the weathering stages. And then once the base colour is dry, I lightly mist the surface just with water. You don't want to soak the model, and you just add enough moisture for the salt to grip on it where you place it. And now I'm adding the salt. Sea salt works well because the grains vary in size, giving a more random pattern. It doesn't have to be sea salt, but I'd avoid anything too fine and uniform such as table salt if you want a natural weathered effect. And with the salt in place, I'm now spraying the same base camouflage colour again, but this time lightened with a small amount of Tamiya's XF white, roughly 5% or 1 or 2 drops. I don't want a completely different colour here, just a slightly faded version of the original tone. This helps create subtle variation once the salt is removed, as the paint has been softened by sunlight, weather and general wear. After the paint has dried, I gently remove the salt with a 1500 grit sanding pad, or even finer, just enough to smooth the surface and reveal the effect underneath. Then I wipe everything down with a clean water on a sponge to get rid of any leftover salt residual. And you can see the effects coming through. And at this point I'm lightening the same camouflage colour for a second time and using it very sparingly over individual panels. The pressure is turned right down and I'm keeping the spray work fine and controlled rather than covering the whole surface again. This gives me 3 distinct layers of colour: the original base coat, the salt weathered lighter coat, and then this final subtle panel fading, and it adds more depth and stops the finish looking too flat or uniform. And that's it, the salt weathering stage is complete. Here's a few photos I've included to show the effects properly. And there's a link to the full Shackleton build at the end of this video as well. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoy scale modelling builds and techniques, feel free to subscribe for more. Catch you next time. Bye for now.